Some courts in the country begin to shut down as the judiciary cannot come to terms as to why budgetary allocation meant for them has not been released. This is today's big story. My name is Prince Minka.
And the closure of the appeal court, the burden has come onto the litigants.
Well, for over a year now, the judiciary has not received its budgetary allocation. The Ghana Bar Association, in a statement earlier on today, called on President John Dramani Mahama to, as a matter of urgency, ensure the release of the budgetary allocation due the judiciary. And according to the association, the inadequate allocation has not been received for over a year. And this was contained in a statement released by the association on Wednesday after a tour of the country's regions by the national executives. Now, I'll tell you a bit more about what they've been saying in that statement, but let me just let you know that information trickling in suggests that some courts in the Ashanti regional capital, Kumasi, are beginning to shut down as a result of the unavailability of the budgetary allocation. Let's go over to the phone lines to Nuruddin Mohammed, our Ashanti regional correspondent, who's been to some of these courts in the Ashanti regional capital. And let's get a sense of what's been happening. Good evening, Nuruddin.
Good evening.
So you were at the court, and obviously you reported that some of them have had to shut down. What's the situation there?
Exactly, Prince. What is happening in Kumasi here is that the appeal court has been closed down because government has not yet allocated funds for the operation of the court. I was at a court, and the Court of Appeal complex in Kumasi here has some other courts within it, and those courts, like the commercial court, the land court, were in operation, but for the appeal court itself, it wasn't working today. The information I gathered is that dockets have been transferred to Accra for the hearing of cases that they have at the appeal court, and that anybody who has case now at the appeal court has to travel to Accra for the hearing.
Mm. And you've been speaking to some of the officials. What have they been telling you?
Well, they are disappointed that government hasn't been able to has not been able to allocate the funds for the operation of the court, and they are saying that if government does not do it immediately, it means it's going to affect some other the litigants and then their lawyers from traveling from here to Accra to hear their case. I also understand that some of these litigants travel from villages to the court, and that in itself it will be a very difficult task for them. Right.
Thank you very much, Nuruddin Mohammed. We can now listen to one of the officials Nuruddin spoke to earlier on today.
And the closure of the appeal court, the burden has come onto the litigants, because if a litigant have a case here and then he is supposed to go to Accra for his or her case, even if he is supposed to pay 50 nowadays.
Well, meanwhile, the Ghana Bar Association has been calling on Parliament to increase internally generated funds from 15% to 75%, as well as the fact that they've also been asking the President, John Dramani Mahama, to ensure the release of the annual subvention meant for the nation's judiciary. So exactly what are the implications here? We're going to be speaking shortly to the Public Relations Officer of the Ghana Bar Association, Tony Forson, and we'll be finding out from him exactly what they've been doing behind closed doors. Have they been speaking to government, and exactly what answers are they getting at this particular moment, as we're already beginning to hear that some of the courts in the Ashanti regional capital have had to shut down, and most of the officials are not happy about the situation. All right, so we have Tony Forson, the Public Relations Officer of the Ghana Bar Association, on the line. Good evening to you, Tony.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for joining us on today's big story. Now, are you aware that some of the courts in the Ashanti regional capital are beginning to shut down as a result of the concern that you raised about budgetary allocation early on?
It cannot be as a result of the concern we raised. It's as a result of what is happening. It is not because we raise a concern that they are shutting down.
But can you tell me...
the state of the they find themselves in.
Exactly.
The lack of funds. That is what is causing it. But if you put it the way you have put it, it will be as if we have caused them to shut down.
But we're beginning to see some of these. I mean, the courts are shutting down. Our Ashanti regional correspondent a couple of moments ago was telling us that some of them have had to, rethink of bringing the case to Accra in order to get legal redress for that matter. But we're likely to see this go on for some time. What have you been doing in terms of advocacy to get government to respond to these calls that you're making?
That is what we've done by putting out the statement. Mind you, we are only stakeholders. This is the Bar Association. We are not the judicial service. So we have to raise the awareness. And that is what we've done. Because we went on our regional tours. And as a result of what you saw in Cape Coast especially, we had to put out this statement to help sensitize the public and the media, for example. You have the wherewithal to send your correspondents to look at the living conditions, look at the conditions in the court, and to report back to you. So our duty, in our view, was to sensitize people to wake up to what was happening. Because, of course, if we don't sensitize you, you might not know. So having raised the issues, then you have the wherewithal to send your correspondents around to see what is happening in the courts. And my brother, I'm telling you, it is not good.
Now, you've also mentioned in your statement that there's a need for Parliament to increase the internally generated funds from 15% to 75%. How is that going to help?
But the question you are asking me, they are operating on 15% and they are on their knees. So definitely, the courts generate a lot of funds. Send these funds to the consolidated fund and retain 15%. So whether it is the administrative bottleneck which makes the money delay in coming back to solve their problems, so why raise the funds, send it to the consolidated fund only to get it back? So we are suggesting that if Parliament, under a certificate of urgency, can get this figure raised, even if it is to 60%, then most of the problems that the judicial service is facing will be ameliorated. Mind you, the Constitution says that the judicial service, the judiciary, shall be as independent as possible with regard to their financial matters. Now, they send the budget is slashed. So how do you even guarantee their independence? You understand me? So as much as possible, we should move to the point where the judicial service can raise money and use these monies. In any case, these monies are subject to the Auditor General. So it is not a matter that we are saying that they should raise the monies and use it for themselves, but to use it to run the business of the state, the judicial arm of the state.
Now, owing to the current economic situation in the country, is there a specific time frame you expect government to deal with the situation at hand?
That is why we suggested that Parliament can deal with this under a certificate of urgency. And that is the quickest way. It is the quickest way. The thing is that what we are saying is a fact. It can be verified easily. If it is verified, then it is an important national issue. If that is so, Parliament has the wherewithal to use a certificate of urgency to give a redress to the situation.
Very well. Many thanks for speaking to us, Tony Forson. Tony Forson is the Public Relations Officer of the Ghana Bar Association. Shortly, we'll be bringing on into the discussion former Attorney General Ayikwe Otu, and we'll also hear from him. And then we'll also be in Parliament. We'll also hear from the committee in Parliament in charge of Constitution and Legal Affairs. And I'm told that Ben Abdallah, he's also a member of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Constitution and Parliamentary Affairs. He's on the line. Good evening to you, Honorable, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, and let me also say good evening to all your listeners.
Now, your role is really crucial here as far as preventing a situation where we'll have a total shutdown of many of our courts in the country is concerned, in as much as the GBA and other stakeholders are raising that concern that budgetary allocation meant for the judiciary is not available. So how crucial do you see your role here?
Yes, it seems to me that the government of the day is gradually acquiring a notoriety for putting every sector of the economy into financial crisis. The issue of the judicial crisis can be tackled from two-dimensional angles. If you read the Constitution says that funds voted by Parliament for the judiciary shall be released to the judiciary in quarterly installments. Now, the reason why the judiciary has now found itself in this financial crisis is simply that the quarterly releases or the quarterly installments are not being made as stipulated by the Constitution. It is worthy to note that most of the quarterly installments are now in arrears. So, if the government should heed to the recommendation or to the cry of the judiciary or to the cry of some members of parliament that the quarterly installments should be released to the judiciary annually, then this financial crisis can be nipped in the bud in no distant future. Secondly,
yeah, I was just going to say that with the current challenge that we're facing, as far as the judiciary is concerned, does that go to suggest that, democracy is proving difficult or expensive for Ghana?
It's not. Yes, democracy is expensive, but it takes a leadership with determination, a leadership with the political will, and listening government to be able to solve the numerous problems or the numerous challenges facing the country. And I was going to go to my second issue. The second issue is that when you read the Constitution says that fines and court fines, money generated by the judiciary form part of the consolidated fund. Now, the standing arrangement between the judiciary and the government is that the judiciary retains 50% of their internally generated funds, and the rest of the funds goes to the government. Now, if the government will listen to the request of the judiciary that their percentage of their IGF should be increased to, let's say, 60%, 70%, so that if the budgetary allocations are not released simultaneously, the judiciary can fall on their IGF in order to facilitate their judicial operation. So the argument that some of us are making is that the percentage of the IGF of the judiciary should be increased to, let's say, 80%, or they should even be allowed to retain all 100%, so that as and when the budgetary allocations are not released, then the judiciary can fall on the IGF to facilitate their operations.
But
the government can keep that, so be all for the judiciary. But this government is very adamant and recalcitrant, and I don't think it will heed to their request.
But that's where you also come in. I mean, for you in on the Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Committee in Parliament, I wonder exactly what you've been doing all this while to get government to understand that for over a year now, there's been no budgetary allocation for the judiciary.
The Parliament exercises an oversight responsibility. What we can do is to pile pressure on the government. But unfortunately, Parliament doesn't control the purse. What we can do is to summon the Minister of Finance to Parliament and to ask the Minister why budgetary allocations to the judiciary are not being released.
But the Minister was in Parliament yesterday. How come you didn't raise that issue? If indeed you're supposed to be piling pressure on government.
Pardon?
I'm saying that the Finance Minister was in Parliament yesterday, of course. How come you didn't raise that issue?
In fact, the agenda for the day in Parliament did not form part of the issue of the judiciary. That is why probably that issue was not raised.
But is it an issue that you had noticed prior to the finance minister coming to Parliament yesterday? Were you aware of it?
In fact, I personally was not aware of the issue until it was raised in Parliament by a colleague member today. It was thereafter that I learned that the judiciary has gotten itself into this financial crisis.
And so going forward, we know that some of the courts are beginning to shut down. Now, how are you going to help? Already, the Ghana Bar Association is asking that you get heavily involved. Now, I can just draw your attention to this. They are calling on you, Parliament, to increase the internally generated funds from 15% to 75%. As you ask President Mahama to release the annual subvention. How are you going to do this?
It is worthy to note that Parliament on its own does not increase the internally generated funds or the percentage of the internally generated funds. The procedure is that judiciary will have to send a request through their sector ministry to the Minister of Finance that they want the percentage of their IGF increased to, let's say, 70% or let's say 80%. And if the Minister of Finance agrees to their request, then this will be incorporated in the appropriation bill that will be brought to Parliament. And once that is done, Parliament will definitely approve of that appropriation bill into law, thereby enabling the judiciary to use as much percentage of their IGF as possible in order to facilitate their operations.
But how are you going to be able to power pressure on government when your posturing is this? As per the discussion we've had so far, your posturing is that, look, this is a government that does not seem to listen. How do you think your work is going to be effective? I mean, in terms of piling pressure on the current administration to deal with this issue?
Yes, one of the means of piling pressure on the government is to summon the Minister of Finance, which is part of the parliamentary duty, which is part of our duty.
When are you going to do that?
Yeah, we can do that through asking a question, an urgent question.
But we're beginning to see...
the Minister of Finance an urgent question. And when an urgent question is asked of the Minister of Finance, the Speaker will summon the Minister of Finance as quickly as possible to appear before Parliament to answer why the judiciary has found itself in this financial paralysis.
But my question to you as a member of the committee, exactly when are you going to raise this particular concern, summon the finance minister to Parliament and get him to respond to this issue? Because we're already seeing the effects it is beginning to have on the judiciary. Courts are shutting down.
In fact, a colleague member of Parliament today raised the issue, but he raised the issue at a time when Parliament was about to be adjourned. So the Speaker advised, the First Deputy Speaker advised that the colleagues should raise that issue tomorrow. So I believe that one of the issues that will be hotly debated in Parliament will be the issue relating to the financial crisis faced by the judiciary. And I believe that we will all support when the issue is raised in Parliament. And when that is done, and the civil society also begins to mount pressure on the government cannot but listen. And we will also, as parliamentarians, take the issue to our constituents, and the constituents will also begin to pile pressure on the government. Because if the judiciary is crippled, it makes administration of justice very, very expensive. It makes seeking justice by the ordinary Ghanaians very, very expensive. And you see, let me tell you one thing. There are 4 appeal court centers outside Accra. And there is one in Kumasi, there is one in Tamale, Koforidua, and then there is one in the Central Region. The government is not able to fund the travel expenses of just about 10 appeal court judges that go outside Accra to agitate on matters that come on appeal before this court. Okay? The government is not able to fund the travel expense of just about 10 African judges that go outside Accra to sit on matters that come before them on our team.
Very well.
And that is what we are talking about. And that explains the seriousness of the situation. If the government cannot cater for travel expenses and allowance of just 10 African judges, then you can imagine how serious the situation is. And you can imagine the kind of financial abyss this country is being run into.
Very well.
Being run into.
Very well. I'm going to have to thank you very much for talking to us, Honorable. We will also be getting on the phone lines the Deputy Attorney General. We've been trying to reach him, but it's been difficult. We'll also be putting on the line the former Attorney General, Honorable Ayikwe, who's also going to tell us his general views of the situation and what specific advice he would want to give government in this particular case. I'm told Honorable Ayikwe is on the line now. Good evening to you, Honorable.
You don't care about it. Good evening.
Thank you very much for joining us on today's big story. I hope you're doing well.
I am.
Certainly, already the impression that's being created is that government doesn't seem to care about the judiciary, and that's the reason why their budget allocation has not been made available. Is that a case, Honorable?
Well, I must say that those of us who have been in government before will tell you that there's always a hole in the budget, and you must find other useful means of trying to plug those holes. I'm not sure that we've always had, adequate budgets, and I do recall that in my time we spoke about this idea of internally generated funds being made available to the judiciary to help it through the administration. I cannot for my life see why they are having difficulties, because if this internally generated fund, still can't be used, a certain portion, for administration, then what is the big deal? The time was where everything collected had to be paid into the consolidated fund. And then you got to go through the budget procedures and getting monies released to you. But this bright idea of keeping the internally generated fund to run the administration, to assist run the administration came on stream. And therefore, I don't know what is happening, why we are being told that it's so bad that courts have got to be shut down. So for me, I think we need to do a little more probing, because I don't know whether it is the internally generated funds which are no longer being made available to administration, or the budget itself for the judiciary is being held back. I mean, the difficulties are all over. The NBC is ready to go and pay monies for no work done.
But what will be...
these are where things running, the country into difficulty. They've got to sit up.
Right, but what will be your specific advice to government? Because listening to the Ghana Bar Association, for instance, they mentioned that Parliament has a crucial role to play in this. They're even asking Parliament to, as aware, increase the internally generated funds from 15% to 75%. And they think that there are certain procedures Parliament can use to fast-track the whole situation in order to, prevent a situation where a number of courts will be shut down. Do you think that Parliament is in a position to do this?
Yes. If, at first I told you a portion of the externally generated fund, but because I forgot, it's taking some time now. But from what they are saying, if it's only 50% or 30 or so, and they are now asking for 75%, then to me it makes sense. Because, you cannot toy with justice. Are we expecting people to take cudgels and sticks, knives and guns and go and take the law into their own hands? That is not what we want. We've, voted for a constitution which is planked on the rule of law. It's not the rule of men. So how come that we let our judiciary to run down? So the president must have to sit up, and the government must have to sit up, and if parliament must have to change that percentage and raise it. Why not? I would support it because we need it. I mean, these are, human beings like me and you who are manning the benches, who for various reasons have even lost their private lives because this is Africa. You go out and anybody sees you with another, he thinks you are planning something against another person. So they don't go out. They are like always empty. And why should they not be given the few amenities, that they need to enable them work? I had a case. I had to travel to Kumasi, Court of Appeal. Then I got a hearing notice telling me that I should come to the Court of Appeal in Accra. Then I asked myself, what is happening? So I called the registrar of the court in Accra. He said, let me confirm what is happening in Kumasi and get back to you. He called back and says, please, you don't have to go to Kumasi anymore. Come to Accra. At that stage, I did not know. At that point in time, I did not know that due to financial difficulties, the courts in Kumasi are no longer sitting, and we all have to come back to sit in Accra. So it's like serious matter because they serve other places, from the northern, upper west, upper east regions, and the rest, Ronga, they come to Kumasi, and then those of us in Accra stay in Accra. Then there's another one in eastern region, and there's another one in central region. If we start closing them down, you're going to put a burden on litigants and all that,
Very well.
So I think we should have to do something quickly about the judiciary.
I'd like to thank you very much, Honorable Ayuko Otu, for speaking to us here on today's Big Story. Honorable Ayuko Otu is former Attorney General, and he's been speaking to us here. Now, coming up shortly, though, it's Mariam Toure, and of course, she's got a number of issues that some of you have been, picking on the social media. It's Joy News Interactive. Stay tuned.